Well, hi there! Hi, everybody. Welcome to the first ever Clint's Reptiles live stream. I thought I'd begin by giving you guys an update on my primates. You've never met the primate that I'm married to, but this is my amazing wife, Leisha. I give her an overall score of 5 out of 5.
You're a nut.
You guys know Owen from our video about the top 5 reptiles for kids, and you know Penny Rose from our video about Argentine tegus. Leisha's even wearing our Penny Rose with Gus Gus Argentine tegu shirt from our Teespring store. So go ahead and, you could have your own Penny Rose with Gus Gus shirt. Penny, what have you got there? What's your favorite animal? And Penny just got this toy snake yesterday from Uncle Ray, who is, he was a great friend to our family all my life. And when I was a kid, he'd get me things like this. And now I have my own kids, and he's doing the same thing for them. And it's really special. Well, they're doing great. Oh, and how old are you?
I'm 5.
He's 5, and he's going to be 6 pretty soon. Penny Rose, how old are you?
3.
She's 3.
Tell them loud so they can hear.
Yeah, with feeling.
3.
She's
Good
3, and she's going to be 4 here pretty soon, so we're excited for their birthdays. Leisha's birthday's a ways off. Mine's before that, so we'll celebrate that first. Well, thank you, wonderful primates. You guys doing well? We'll have to give you guys a score sometime. These particular primates, I give a score of 5 out of 5, but if we were rating, like, babies, it'd be lower. It'd be lower. Corn snakes and leopard geckos, way better pets.
Rude.
Yeah.
I like the babies.
Thank you guys for joining me.
Love you.
Love you guys. Love you, Penny Rose.
Bye.
Well, we are excited to have you guys here. Looks like quite a few of you've already joined, and I don't want to be I'm going to sit around and wait till you join. So let's get right into some stuff. Our theme for today is care and housing. And I've been talking to a lot of people, unsurprisingly, about reptiles lately. And I've been speaking to a lot of people who are newer to the reptile hobby. And something I didn't realize that has really stuck out to me is the fact that a lot of people don't really understand the very basics of enclosure setups. And so sometimes I'm talking about these things as though you have a foundation in enclosures, and a lot of you do, but some of you don't, and I don't want to be talking over your heads, because actually not understanding the basics of enclosure setups can lead to major problems with your pet reptile. So I have brought with me a very simple enclosure setup today. You can see it. Isn't it glorious? And sorry, the bottom is going to be a little bit off screen, but this is a 10-gallon enclosure, which is probably the most common aquarium size that you're going to see. As it turns out, this enclosure size is too small for most pet reptiles, though we will have a video in the not-so-distant future about some of the best pet reptiles that you could keep in an enclosure this size. But this is a 10-gallon enclosure, and it is set up in a very basic way, but it's functionally pretty good for a reptile small enough to fit in here. It's got in the bottom substrate. In this case, those are aspen shavings, which work for some reptiles. It's not going to be the ideal substrate for others. In our videos, I usually try to point out at least one good substrate choice for that particular reptile. And it's going to be really important that you pick the right substrate for them. It has a lid. Lids are important, and this lid stinks. These sorts of lids that you just set on top work just fine. I'm going to pull this cord out because you're not going to want your cords inside. That cord is for the heat mat. We'll discuss that in a second. But a good fitting lid can be really important. If you have something in here like, well, not here, right? But in your enclosure like a tortoise or something like that, then they're not likely to get out. You may not even need a lid. But if it's something like a snake is going to be out of this lid the first night. If it's a baby and can't get all the way up the side, maybe not, but it's amazing what snakes can do, and they'll figure out ways to get out of there. And they sell lid clamps for lids like this, and that will help a lot. You could also put a big weight on top which won't work if you need lights or something like that. But I would recommend enclosures with sliding lids. I think those are just a lot better. But this is the kind of lid you're going to see the most often. And like I said, I'd only use it with lid clamps, and even then, sliding lids are the way to go. But looking inside, I've got a water bowl, which is an absolute must. I've got a hide, and there are lots of good kinds of hides that can work. And I've got a temperature gauge, and this temperature gauge will give me an ambient air temperature for the enclosure, which is useful, but it's not the most useful thing. And so what you're going to want probably is something like this. This is a laser heat gun, and it's going to give you surface temperatures. And the reason that you want surface temperatures is because these are the far more relevant temperatures to your animal. One thing is you're going to want to make sure that your animal's not going to burn itself. And you also want to make sure that they're warm enough for it to get up to the proper temperatures to digest its food. So I would recommend something like this in the future, not for the live stream, but we'll try to get some links on there in the coming days so you can find some of these stuff, because a lot of this stuff comes from Amazon. On the bottom, I'm going to pull out the water bowl so we don't break anything. Pull out the hide too. On the bottom of this enclosure, there's a heat mat. Whoa, did you hear what that did to the sound? That was cool. There's a heat mat on the bottom. And these shouldn't get too hot, but I would still recommend using a thermostat. And the thermostat is going to have a little probe that you're going to attach using pretty good tape or something over that heat mat to make sure that it doesn't get crazy hot, and it'll turn that heat mat off if it gets too hot. But not every animal is going to be okay with just a heat mat. And one thing I want to point out is the fact that it's off to one side. And this is one of the things that I've discovered that a lot of people new to the hobby don't realize, which is that you want to have your heat source off to one side in the enclosure. And that's actually part of the reason that 10-gallon enclosures are not very good, is because you can't get your heat source too far away from both sides of the tank. I like the 20-gallon long for smaller animals because it's about this height and width, but you can get your heat source way off to one side in a 20-gallon long. And that means that there can be a hot spot so that if your animal needs to get warm, it can go over there. But if it's getting too warm, it can get away from that hot spot. And that's extremely important. So, just last couple things. This is an ultraviolet light, and a lot of animals are going to require UV. This one you can see goes across the whole thing. That's okay. This doesn't generate a lot of heat, but you do want to make sure you can get fairly close to the animal because UV doesn't travel a tremendous distance. And one other thing is a lot of times they've got like a little plastic shield over the light bulb. That will actually block a lot of the UV. So you're going to want to remove that. And the last thing I've got for you is just a traditional heat lamp. And this just has a regular incandescent bulb in it because these are not producing my UV, though we do recommend some mercury vapor bulbs, which will provide a decent amount of UV in addition to the heat. But you're going to want to put that off to one side when you set up your enclosure, again, so that the animal can get away from the heat. They usually want to bask at a temperature, say you have an animal that needs a really high basking spot, like 120 degrees, that's great. But if you trap it at 100 degrees all the time, you actually risk cooking that animal and it could die. So always make sure that your heat source is off to one side and that you're checking your temperatures regularly to make sure your surface temperatures are appropriate so that you don't cook anything and so that it's getting warm enough to digest its food and be healthy. And that's a pretty good basic enclosure setup. And if you have more questions about that, well, we're going to be taking questions for the rest of this time. So I'm going to take this away. Let's get to it. Mr. Jason, what's our first question, good sir?
Yeah, so Aaron Thompson said,
Hi, Aaron.
What do you consider a decent size enclosure for a 3-year-old green iguana?
Oh. I would recommend when you get a green iguana, let me back up. I would recommend you never get a green iguana. But if you have a green iguana and it's more than just a hatchling. I would recommend going ahead and getting your full adult setup, because you're going to need that, and you might as well not buy like 10 bigger and bigger and bigger enclosures along the way. By the time it's 3, it's going to be getting fairly sizable, but be prepared for something that you're going to need for a 6-foot iguana, which ideally would be like a room in your house. At the very smallest, you're going to need a lot of height, a lot of length. 8 by 8 by 4, 4 feet wide, 8 feet long, 8 feet tall would probably be a great size for a growing iguana. Like, that's a minimum size, I would say, for an iguana. They need a ton of space, and as big as you can do, biggest possible enclosure.
Alice Loveat, I'm sure I'm butchering that name.
Sorry.
Can you please come to the UK on tour like rock bands do? I'd really like to give you a high five, and would be a dream come true.
Not for only you. That would be stinking rad. Many of you are probably aware that I am a graduate student. Well, I'm finishing that, and I have spent a few years teaching as faculty after my master's, because I was finally qualified to do that. But I'm poor. That is part of being a graduate student, and the way that I have found that I am the most poor is in ability to drive cars that don't break down all the time and to travel. But I'm hoping that as this channel grows, it affords us the ability to travel, because there is nothing I would like more than to go all over the place. Go to places like Australia and Europe and Africa and Asia and South America, which is one of the few places outside of the country that I have been to, and visit you guys, because you're amazing, and that would be so incredible. I'd love to go to reptile expos all over the world, like Dave Kaufman does. We love his channel. He's awesome. He's been a great supporter of our channel. In fact, he's coming out here to see us in August, and we're going to film some videos together. I love living vicariously through him, because he goes all over the world and sees cool things, and someday maybe that could be me too. If you want to help, feel free to support us on Patreon. Maybe, add a little note. I'm trying to get Clint to Europe. That'd be awesome.
Let's see. What is the usual tank size for a leopard gecko?
The usual tank size for a leopard gecko, I would say a pretty typical.
That was my crested gecko. So.
My crested gecko. So I would say a kind of the minimum size that I would use for a leopard gecko would be a 20-gallon long, which I've already said is a stinking rad enclosure. I love the 20-gallon long, just because it's not super tall, so you can get it pretty warm, and it's long enough that it can be warm on one side and not very warm on the other side. It's lovely that way. Gives them quite a bit of space to explore. Of course, with everything, more size is usually better. There are a few animals that if it's so big, they might not be able to find their food, and that is a concern. You definitely want to make sure that they can find their food. But if you kept leopard geckos in a 40-gallon or a 55 or a 75-gallon tank, they're going to find food, especially if you feed them with tongs or something like that.
Tom Not So Shaw says, "Hey Clint, as a reptile fan, what do you think of the Jurassic movies?"
Oh, as a reptile fan, what do I think of the Jurassic movies? It depends on which Jurassic movie. Okay, this is like trigger warning, some controversial thoughts coming up here. Jurassic Park, the first one, is probably on the list of the 10 greatest things that has ever happened to me. As a kid, I loved that movie, and I saw it so many times with my Uncle Ray, who got Penny that snake. I saw Jurassic Park so many times in theaters, and every time I was scared before it started, and every time it was the greatest thing that ever happened. And the only problem I ever had with that movie is it has a lot of really awkward dialogue. And so for most of my life, I've actually liked the second Jurassic Park even better. The Lost World, that's a very controversial opinion that I just mentioned, but I really liked it. It's really a lot of fun. and it doesn't have all the weird dialogue. Since becoming a scientist and meeting a lot more scientists, I've realized that weird dialogue is actually par for the course. That's just the way they talk. They're shouldn't go on too long on this. But they have weird conversations. And so, Jurassic Park 1, totally realistic, back to being my very favorite. Those two movies I adore because in a lot of ways, they deal with the way that real people would deal with a traumatic situation involving dinosaurs. Jurassic Park 3, I saw it twice on the same day, the day that it came out in theaters, and then I never saw it again. But Owen, my son, has recently been excited about Jurassic Park, and I'm not going to deny him the opportunity to watch Jurassic Park. And I've always owned Jurassic Park 3 because it came as a 3-pack when I got them on DVD. And so he watched Jurassic Park 3, and I saw segments of it the other day, and it was pretty darn good. I mean, you know, I don't know if it's not on par with those first two, but I've for years thought it's really not very good at all. And so with those expectations, it's decent. The new Jurassic World, the first one, I was optimistic that it would be like a new Jurassic Park movie. And what it was essentially a summer action romp with dinosaurs in it, which was really disappointing to me because what I love about Jurassic Park is it's so real. Like, you know, if this happened, that is the way real people would probably handle that situation. In Jurassic World, you know, they're like high-fiving each other. You know, if you've got a pack of velociraptors, and these aren't velociraptors, if you have a pack of Deinonychus, which is what those actually are supposed to be. You have a pack of Deinonychus chasing you and your brother, and you're in the back of a truck, and they're like getting ready to leap in, and you kick one, and you're like, yeah, we got it. No, that's not what you'd say. You know, you wouldn't be like high five, and you'd be like terrified still because there's still a huge pack of Deinonychus chasing you. And it's an action hero movie, not a realistic movie. And so I was very disappointed by it. But a summer action romp with dinosaurs, that's awesome. As long as you don't expect it to be a new Jurassic Park, that's awesome. And so I went into Jurassic World 2. Jason says I need to talk less about Jurassic Park, but you got me talking about one of my favorite things. What am I supposed to do? Jurassic World 2, I went into it with the expectations that it would be a summer action romp with dinosaurs, and it was awesome. So I really enjoyed it. They're not Jurassic Park, but they are fun dinosaur movies. The end.
Okay. Baconly Swiss gave us our first super chat, which is cool.
Super chat.
Baconly,
the first.
Baconly asks, "What do you think of being massaged by huge snakes?" What I think he means is, "What do you think of big snake hugs?"
Okay, so I can take this in two ways because there are actually like snake massage parlors that I don't know what to make of that.
Oh,
right?
Maybe that's what he's talking about.
I've never been to one, but I recognize why that's appealing. It's actually why I have a bigger boa than my biggest boa that is growing right now, is because holding a ball python like on your neck, lovely, right? It's really a wonderful feeling. Holding my 7-foot Central American boa on my neck, one of the coolest feelings ever. Like, it just, because it like gives you a whole upper body snake hug, and it's just an amazing feeling. And my only thing about it is, like, I just wish she was a little bit bigger. And so I got a common boa, female, because she will get just a little bit bigger than my Central American boa, and that will be snake massage perfection. Big fan.
Let's see. Northwest Fancy Fuzzies did a super chat for $1, but didn't ask a question.
Wow, so you're just awesome as all? You're just like, I think you should have $1.
Robert.
That's going to help me get to Europe.
Robert Cook did the same, but he asked a question earlier, I believe. How do I tame an aggressive bearded dragon?
Ooh, I've had aggressive bearded dragons. Because bearded dragons in the wild, I don't know if you know this, but they live in a really scary place and everything's trying to eat them. And so a wild bearded dragon is actually a pretty wily creature. There's a great video of Steve Irwin. He's like down on all fours with this little bearded dragon, and it comes up and bites him on the nose because that's what they do. And I've I've not purchased. I've rescued bearded dragons before that were not socialized, and as a result, they acted like wild bearded dragons. And so you go in and they're all mouth open and beard out and trying to scare you away. A few great things about bearded dragons is they're mostly all show, and they're not very flexible. With a monitor lizard, for example, if you pick it up, it can wheel around with that snake-like neck of theirs and just bite you. But bearded dragon, if you have it picked up, it might be all, but unless you stick your fingers in its mouth, it's not going to bite you. You're going to be okay. And so the biggest thing I would recommend with a bearded dragon like that is start tongue feeding it. You get some tongs, and give it insects that way. Make your interactions really positive for a long time so that it associates you with good things happening, but it doesn't associate your fingers with food. That's why I'd recommend tongs. And, and as time goes on, just start picking it up. It might act grumpy because they're just trying to scare you off. But it's going to calm down. Bearded dragons they're not difficult to tame. And as it just gets used to handling, it'll become like any other domesticated, accustomed to captivity, bearded dragon, and you'll be able to hold it and it'll be great. They're so wonderful, and they'll calm down. Just make handling sessions short and positive, and make sure there's food involved, and they'll be happy as a clan.
All right, guys, I am trying to keep up with all your questions.
He can't keep up. You guys are fast and furious with these questions. Good on you.
Got Rice asked, could I keep Schroeder skinks and fire skinks together in the same tank?
I wouldn't. I don't know. This isn't something I've researched. I don't even know if this is something that like people have public forums about keeping multiple skink species together. Skinks in general don't really like other skinks. I mean, sometimes it's okay. We have a whole video on the dangers associated with cohabitation. It might be interesting. Both of those skinks are going to be hidden a lot of the time. So, I would just recommend having separate enclosures for each of them. The thing is, it might not cause any problems. I don't know. But there are a lot of issues that can occur when you're housing animals together. And if you don't house them together, you don't run into any of those risks. But if you do house them together, you have all those risks, and some of them can be catastrophic.
Okay. Just a shout out to a bunch of people that have been doing the super chats, which is super nice. Big T Shell, Nicole Causel, Jinxie, Ian Hughes, Southern Grandma Tours. You guys did. Thank you so much. You guys are crazy.
They're just super chatting to be rad.
They're super.
Are they not? They're not even asking questions. They're just like,
not those guys.
You guys are. What the heck? Thank you. That is the nicest thing. Now I got to go to Europe and wherever you guys are. You guys are so kind. Thank you.
So we had a super chat with characters that I don't know. Some sort of.
Oh, okay.
Asian characters. I'm not exactly sure which ones, but they asked simply dream reptiles. Quick list of your dream reptiles.
I'm actually gonna. Whoa, dream reptiles. Okay. Oh gosh. Number one on my list. Oh gosh, I don't know if there's an order. Cuvier's dwarf caiman. Probably Cuvier's dwarf caiman. I don't know how he pronounced his name, but the smallest crocodilian in the world. Nerd. New England Reptile Distributors. They've got a pretty rad reptile YouTube channel that you should check out. It's growing fast because they're a very well-respected breeder. They produce a lot of cool caimans and other lizards, and then they tend to socialize them pretty well. Some of their adults are very friendly. Someday, if I had the facilities to house a caiman, which I'm not there, but someday I would love to have that. I love big boas. I already have that. Oh! This was one of my long-term dream reptiles and remains one of my long-term dream reptiles. And this is Sinatra, my lesser or super lesser pastel blue-eyed leucistic ball python. This was definitely on my list of dream reptiles. And nothing has changed now that I have one. It's still one of my dream reptiles. I love snapping turtles, common snapping turtles, and alligator snapping turtles. I love them. What else would be on that list? I'm living a lot of my dreams, to be perfectly honest. Tegus, I didn't even know they were my dream reptile. Gus Gus was, I always kind of thought of them as kind of like a not as cool alternative to monitors till I had Gus Gus. And he's totally different than a monitor. And I can't hardly imagine how a reptile could be a better pet than that. He's the ultimate. So, caiman lizards are now on this list. My false water cobra, when it gets big, that's going to be a dream. There are lots of dreams. And I have big plans.
Okay. Let's see. Vlad the Impaler
Oh,
asked, "How long?
try to stay on your good side.
How long will my blue tongue hibernate for? I'm worried about her."
I've never hibernated a blue tongue. They'll a lot of times slow down and kind of brumate in the winter. If it's doing that, it's probably doing that in response to shorter photo periods. So if it's getting dark earlier, and even if you've just got a window in your room or whatever, it's going to be picking up on that. So if it's doing that right now, you are probably in the southern hemisphere. And also cooler temperatures. What you could do is slowly warm your temperatures up and try to do things to increase the photo period each day. Adding UV light, if you don't have UV light, could help with this. But if you're concerned that it's been too long, I would try to do things to get it to naturally come out of brumation.
Okay. Let's see. Psycommunist. I probably butchered that. What do you think about day-night cycles for boa constrictors? Is natural light enough, or do you need to arrange a setup? Also, can you recommend a hygrometer?
A specific
Hydrometer?
hygrometer? Okay, so
I think we linked to one.
yeah, we've usually got some links to hygrometers, but I will put more study into that one to tell you a specifically good one. Generally, here's how I'd approach it: is I would look for hygrometers on Amazon and see which ones have a lot of ratings and 5 stars. But when it comes to boa day-night cycles, photo period is generally going to be important for any animal. They're going to be basing a lot of their hormone releases and just when they're sleeping, when they're active, on photo period. Also, when they're preparing to breed and things like that, they're all very photo period dependent. So I would definitely recommend having a clear day-night cycle, though you probably don't need to set something up unless you have your reptiles, say, in a room with absolutely no outside light. I definitely wouldn't recommend, though, if you have lighting in the room, that you leave it on all night long, because that could mess with a lot of your reptiles.
Bob Reed says, "How often do I have to replace a mercury vapor bulb?"
Ooh, that's a very good question. How often do I need to replace a mercury vapor bulb? I do know that they stop emitting UV, and I'm not sure off the top of my head, but I think it's going to be probably around a year, maybe less. And being an incandescent bulb, they're not going to last forever, so it might not go too much longer. It probably depends on if it's your primary UV source or not. If you're using it as a supplementary UV source and you've got a tube light or something like that as the primary UV that you're replacing every 6 months to a year, you can probably go longer with your mercury vapor bulb. However, if it's the only source of UV, I would check for that specific bulb and see how long they're supposed to emit UV, and it should, you should be able to look this up somewhere, because there are people who do tests. I haven't done these tests, and then just replace it right around them.
Let's see. Ty's Animal World says, "Any videos for Cuban false chameleons in the near future? I've wanted one for a while, but there's not much captive care info online. Huge fan."
So we do have 2 videos already that feature the Cuban false chameleon, and of course we are going to make a full video on the Cuban false chameleon. Honestly, the reason that we haven't made one up until now is because I have them, which sounds all kinds of backwards, but when we have access to really cool reptiles, we kind of want to take advantage. And we save a lot of the stuff I have for times where it's really difficult for us to find something else, or when our plans with another reptile maybe fall through. And we have had so many awesome people giving us access to super cool reptiles that it has put that one off for a long time. But it's kind of near the top of my list of reptiles that I have that I know we need to make a full video soon. So when there is any sort of a lull, count on that one.
Let's see. So we have a question here. Is it hard to switch a... so this is from Flying Furby. Is it hard to switch a ball python from live to frozen thawed?
It really depends on what kind of a feeder your ball python is. A lot of ball pythons, like Sinatra here, they just like to eat. I've got a lot of ball pythons, and I would say 90% of them just like to eat. And, they eat almost like boas, maybe a little less consistently, but when they're hungry, they take whatever smells and is the right temperature, smells like food and is the right temperature. And so in a lot of cases, the biggest thing is thawing that frozen food item in a really complete way and in a way that doesn't affect the smell too much. So I don't like to get them super wet. A lot of people use that. A good way can be just putting them in your refrigerator overnight, and then they're pretty warm. And then I set them near a basking light for another animal. You've got to be very careful with this, though, because if you forget it, don't forget it. But I set them near a basking light until they get up to like the actual temperature of a rodent. And then I have long tongues and I wiggle it around and do the mouse dance, and most of them will take it. And sometimes if they're not interested, all I have to do is get it a little bit warmer and they're immediately interested. Ball pythons, they've got these heat sensitive pits on their snoot. And so those are on their lips. They're called labial heat pits. And so they can tell if it's not the right temperature. I do have a small percentage of all my ball pythons that do not seem very interested in frozen thawed. Every now and then I can get them to take one, but some of them I'm still stuck on live, and I really don't like feeding live at all. There's just danger involved with it, and it's a little bit tragic to observe. Of course, I mean, even frozen thawed rodents, they're having to be killed somehow, and but I guess there's an out of sight, out of mind sort of a feeling about it. But it's inconvenient at the very least having to get live rodents, and I do have a few that I just haven't been able to get switched. You can try different kinds of food items and just give them a while. I mean, ball pythons can go a while without feeding. If they're just really, really satiated, then they're not going to be interested in something unless it's exactly what they want. If they get a little bit hungrier, they'll be less selective. You're the same way.
Northwest Fancy Fuzzies basically says, come out to visit us in Tacoma, Washington, as well as if I also wanted to know if you were interested in me sending you one of my motley amyl horn snakes that just hatched. I am now also breeding Florida blue garter snakes. Love from Washington.
Holy smokes. Let's stay in touch, because that's very tempting and very kind of you to even think of something like that. We would love to go to Washington. I've never been there. I went to the ESA, Ecological Society of America conference in Portland, Oregon, so I could almost look at Washington. But it's really nice up there, and everybody from Washington says it's the greatest. So my wife's been wanting to go for years. We would love to go to Washington sometime, and it would be great to meet you. So let's stay in touch and see what we can put together.
Let's see. Kipring Payne says Chewies are
Awesome.
Are a fave of yours.
Yes.
What's your dream setup for Chewy?
My dream setup for a Chewy would be just like a enormous glorious planted enclosure with water features, and I mean that's basically my dream setup for everything. I love that kind of thing. You know, I my interest in nature is very driven by what cool creatures am I likely to find there. So like I love barren landscapes a whole lot because there's probably lizards, and that's awesome. I don't, even though I come from Colorado, I never liked the mountains that well because there were very few cool reptiles up in the mountains. And so you know, places like the rainforest, amazing. And if I can have a simulated mini rainforest in my house, my life is just better. It's just better.
Dusty Smith says or asks, how can you have lots of snakes in limited space?
Snakes are probably the best as far as animals that you can have many of in a small space, because snakes in the wild basically want to live in a hole, right? When you're a noodle with a head, the world is a scary place. And so most of the time they're trying to just avoid detection and hide somewhere. But there are many things that draw snakes out of their holes. One of them is they need to thermoregulate. They need to find food. They need to find water. They need to find mates. Those are the biggest things. If, you know, and sometimes they need to poop. If they could find a hole that had a perfect temperature gradient inside of it so they could both digest their food and get cooler when they don't want to be so warm, where their poop would magically disappear, where water would appear all the time, there was constant availability of water, and food showed up whenever they were hungry. Oh, and also, potentially, mates just appear in there sometimes and then leave afterward and leave you alone, because as a snake, you generally want to be left alone. That'd be the best thing ever that happened to a snake. And so that is essentially the best way to house a snake, is to provide all those things. And so snakes don't actually need or even usually want as much space as you would give to a comparably sized lizard. Which means that, you know, housing snakes in things like snake racks, actually, I mean, it's great for the snake. It's not particularly good for being able to view them. You know, if you want to imagine yourself as a snake in there, like, you'd be bored. But for a snake, that's like a dream come true. And so snake racks, I mean, you can house a lot of snakes in a relatively small area using snake racks, much smaller than if you were using large aquaria and custom built enclosures that you'd need for comparably sized lizards.
Latham Clark asks, can you make some videos setting up hatchlings, tegus, ball pythons, geckos with appropriate enclosure, husbandry, lighting, diet explanations, and typical growth rates, like video care sheets?
No, I can't. I mean, I can do some of that stuff, but I can tell you, we're not going to get into video care sheets anytime soon. And the reason for this is because video is not the right media for a care sheet. Care sheets are the right media for a care sheet, because, you know, we, like, on this channel, we do an introduction to a lot of reptiles because we want you to get a feel for, you know, what would it be like to have this reptile? What are the pros and cons? We want you to have a really, really informed choice before you dig in to all the nitty gritty of owning that reptile. You know, you don't want to have to research every single reptile for like 6 months before you can decide, you know, this is a terrible choice for me. We want to give you that first 6 months for free, but then you need to find a real care sheet, and you need to find a community of keepers. I mean, I could probably make a few on reptiles that I've kept for a long time, but I'm not really qualified to make an excellent care sheet on every single reptile we review, because I don't have that much experience with them. And what you should do is find communities. I love some of the communities on Facebook that are specific to a reptile that you've decided that's the one for me. Find that community, and you know, and get involved in discussions. Speak to the keepers that are keeping them a lot, and find the best care sheets. Because the thing is, you know, to put together a really comprehensive care sheet, it would take like a 6-hour YouTube video, and nobody wants to watch that. It's just not the right media. What you need is that written care sheet that when you have questions, you can go right to that section and find exactly what you need. You know, and if we ever, I mean, we are in so deep with all kinds of rad reptiles that we just need to give you a basic introduction. The day may come when we have covered basically everything, but that will be years from now. And then, then maybe we could start digging into the nitty gritty, at least of the reptiles that I've kept. But until then, my recommendation is find a real care sheet put together by the most experienced keepers of that reptile. We love that you come to us and that you trust us, but I don't know everything. I'd like to, but I don't know everything about every reptile. And so I keep it to the level that I can give you confident and good, solid information, because, I can't tell you everything, but I want you to know that what I can tell you is the truth.
Vlad the Impaler says, one reptile you wish could be imported that can't.
One reptile I wish could be imported that can't. Everything from Australia. Now, I don't really wish that and Fijian iguanas, those are cool. It's not that I wish we were collecting them in the wild and importing them, but there are some fantastic breeders in Australia that produce cool reptiles that didn't get at least to the United States before they banned export. And some of them are so amazing. I mean, different species of bearded dragons. We've really only got two. We've got the Rankin's dragon and the bearded dragons that you're more familiar with, Bogona vidiceps. And that's it. But there are other species of bearded dragons and amazing cool blue tongues, amazing monitors. We've got some cool Australian monitors, but a lot of them we don't have. And morphs of really cool stuff like spotted pythons and children's pythons. Amazing stuff. I wish, but I also totally understand why Australia is being very protective of their wildlife. They have very unique fauna because Australia has been isolated from the rest of the world for a long time. And the thing is, the stuff that lives in Australia is not adapted to handle the stuff that has been evolving in the rest of the world. And if we start introducing it, as has occurred in Australia, it could cause really big problems for the native fauna. And if we're exporting all the native fauna, catching them all out of the wild, then they lose one of the most special things in the whole world. So I get it, but it also, as a reptile keeper and enthusiast, it's sad.
Okay, let's see. Rezaru says, just saying hi and love your channel. You, sir, are awesome.
Well, thank you. And hi back to you. You probably want to, well, hi there. So there you go. You see the eyes? That's how you know it's real.
Mike Chapman says, hi, Clint. I've got a Sinolone.
Oh,
Milk
Sinolone?
snake. There you go. Never bitten me. She's 12 now. How often should she be shedding? She sheds well monthly. Thanks from England.
That's great. Snakes are going to shed more often when they're young, as they're growing quickly. And then as they get to be adults, snakes have indeterminate growth. So they grow throughout their entire life. But as they transition in their life history from investing almost all their energy into growth into investing more of their energy into reproduction, even if they're not successfully reproducing, their growth rate slows tremendously. And so they're mostly shedding as a way of maintaining their skin more than because they're growing. When they're growing quickly, they need to shed just because that skin's not big enough. Monthly is a lot. I mean, that you might actually be able to scale back feedings a little bit, but milk snakes have kind of a faster metabolism. So, once a month is not a concern. That sounds great. Sounds like you're nailing it.
Mackenzie Peralt says, my crickets keep dying.
They do that.
Do you think getting a cricket keeper will help? Also, how do you feel about bug chow?
So your crickets are dying. They do that. Crickets don't live a whole long time. If you're getting large crickets, like already adult crickets with wings, those, they're getting close to expiration date when you get them. I have no idea how you're keeping them. So, if you're keeping them like in the bag that they come from the pet store in, then a cricket keeper would be a much better option. If you want them to, the best success I've ever had keeping crickets was I kept them in a 10-gallon glass enclosure with a fairly thick layer of soil at the bottom, and a good lid. And, I was throwing food in with them periodically, trying not to get them too wet that can cause a problem. But they were reproducing in there, so I had multiple generations of crickets going. I had free crickets for a long time, and they were in my beetle lab. I did research with burying beetles, and they smell terrible. And so when people are like, crickets smell bad, I'm like, oh, maybe they do. I don't even know, because compared to those beetles that are living on mouse carcasses, the crickets smell terrific. So, and I, the noise wasn't a problem for me because they were in there. That's how I've had the best success keeping crickets long term. Otherwise, I just buy crickets in relatively small quantities, feed them off within a few days. I make sure that I keep the crickets hydrated and well fed and gut loaded. Cricket chow, I'd have to look into the specific one a little bit better, but it's probably fine. But also just produce. If you just throw some produce scraps in there with them, that's also tremendous. Extra crested gecko diet, if you have that, that's great for insects. It's good for gut loading them.
Okay, we're gonna do speed round.
Speed round.
Ready?
Let's do this.
Pretty cute 567 did a super chat with any tips on starting a dubia roach colony.
Yeah, get one right now, and put it in a big bin with really slick sides. Put lots of egg cartons in there. Throw produce in with them. Keep them warm. You're going to want a heat pad or something on there. Keep it next to a heat light. If that's what I do, but that's not normal. Heat pad is probably the way to go. And then just enjoy your lifetime of free feeder insects, and this feeling that none of your produce scraps ever go to waste. You're like, watermelon rinds. Oh, not garbage. Give me those. I want them all.
Speed round.
Speed round.
Jerry C., was your dissertation accepted by the committee?
Yes.
Okay, speed round. Jonathan Kramer did a super chat. Any tips on trimming a Savannah monitor's nails?
Put something rough in there, like a stone that it climbs over to get to food. If you're going to trim the nails, you got to be really careful. I don't think I would really recommend it, but something that allows them to wear their nails down a little bit naturally, tremendous.
Speed round. Southern Grandma Tours. Any tips for crested gecko? Hello from Nebraska.
Tips for crested geckos. They're awesome. They're really awesome. Love them. Don't get them too hot. Keep them properly hydrated. Feed them. Enjoy the heck out of them.
Azure Abel Pizia. I totally.
Yeah, that's exactly how it's said.
Sorry, Azure. Our baby hognose has been very picky, and we have finally gotten him to eat normally. Currently, takes a pinky every week. How much / often should he eat?
As a baby, especially if he's eating pinkies, I mean, you can feed him more often, maybe a couple times a week. That'll slow down as he gets older. But, just kind of watch his weight. If he's getting really, really pudgy, simmer down. Otherwise, and if you speed grow them, that they might not live quite as long. So you don't need to force feed it or power feed it. But a couple times a week would probably be good while it's young.
Speed round. Travis Burnett did a super chat. Clinton crew, you are awesome. Keep up the good work. Thank you so much for what you do.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Lathan Clark, speed round. He gave a super chat and said, gotcha. The care sheet thing made sense. Can you do a video about Chinese crocodile lizards? Oh, yes. You always review and rate the coolest animals. We appreciate you, by the way.
It's amazing how many people talk about the Shinosaurus, the Chinese crocodile lizards, because I didn't think very many people knew about them. Great Basin Serpentarium, who is, one of my favorite places in the world. They're one of the best breeders of Chinese crocodile lizards. So for sure, we're going to cover them. For sure. So rad.
Speed round.
Speed round.
Sydney Baldwin. I'm wanting to be a herpetologist.
You're all right by me.
Any tips?
Be one.
Tip.
Get involved in research. Find a lab that does herpetology as an undergraduate, and talk to the professor and get involved with doing research as an undergraduate. If you have a professor that is interested in taking you on in their lab, graduate school, it'll be pretty easy to get in. Research experience is worth more than your degree.
Robert Cook did a super chat and said, Tegu indoor cage / outside shed. Love from Florida. I think what he means is he's keeping it outside in the shed certain times.
Yeah, that works. Just make sure that shed doesn't get too hot or too cold.
Let's see. What's your so this is I Love Anime. What's your opinion on keeping free roaming tegus?
It's okay. It's okay. Your house is probably not the ideal enclosure for a tegu, so make sure it has a really good enclosure at the very least that it can retreat into. But I mean, compared to any other reptile I can think of, they do a lot better with this sort of a setup than, well, like I said, any other reptile.
Snake Discovery's on the chat. And
No big deal. Emily, hi!
Emily says,
We're going to see her later this month.
exactly. Looking forward to our collab together this month.
Well, we'll see you here in a few weeks. I am super excited. We're going to the Rad Zoo. The Rad Zoo. I thought Emily kept calling it the Rad Zoo because I say rad a lot. No, it turns out it's called the Rad Zoo. So, yeah, we're going. It's going to be awesome.
Another Jason, not this one, says, just wanted to say thank you for your information and videos. You are a big help in me deciding on a BCI. He named it Kevin.
Kevin!
And a leopard gecko, Nala. Looking forward to getting a tegu next.
Woo! You've got good choice. And the nice thing about the name Kevin is because of the movie Up, even if Kevin turns out to be a girl, it still works.
Let's see. Mr. Bloom asks, are those plants real?
Oh! No. They used to be. We used to use real plants, and we had to haul them in here every time. And when we upgraded our set, we went to not real plants, which, you know, I like real plants a whole lot for enclosures and stuff, but this is really practical for a set.
Levinti Simon, Simon, I am screwing that up, sorry. Do you think I should buy a male or female bearded dragon? I'm planning on getting one soon from a breeder. I plan on getting a baby. Does the gender matter, Clint?
It doesn't matter too much. The males are more impressive looking in a lot of ways because their heads get bigger. I haven't noticed major personality differences. There probably are some, but they're both just tremendous. And so, you know, if you're thinking about breeding reptiles in the future, it's always better usually to start with a female because it just takes them longer to get up to breeding size. If you're just wanting a cool pet, they're both awesome, just so amazing. Stinking around. Oh, the other thing would be if you were ever thinking about building an enormous enclosure with multiple dragons in it, you definitely don't want two males. Definitely. I mean, I wouldn't really recommend cohabitation necessarily unless you're breeding them anyway, but two males, catastrophic.
Let's see. Cole Rollers asks, any chance of a Dumerel's boa video?
Not only is there a chance, there's a very good chance, and it will probably be pretty soon. Again, Great Basin Serpentarium, they've got some rad Dumerel's boas, and so expect it in the near future.
Andrew Rose asks, do you regret getting any of the reptiles you have?
Do I regret getting any of them? I mean, you know, some of them I've taken on as rescues, so they weren't necessarily like ones that I would have picked to get necessarily. I pretty much love them all. But probably if I was going to like exchange some for something I think is even better, I definitely might not have taken on the grumpiest Dumerel's monitor I've ever seen, because I knew he was grumpy when I got him. But I figured, I mean, he's a Dumerel's monitor. He'll mellow out. No, he is just cranky. And you know, for a Dumerel's monitor, he still eats off tongs for me and stuff. But I'm concerned he will try to bite me.
A person with some script that I can't read, with ending with 1.2.3. What's your opinion on Emerald Swifts?
Emerald Swifts. I have to do more research into them specifically before I give a really. They're probably they're neat. They're very pretty. It seems like people have success captive breeding them. You know, I think they're going to be a lizard that's probably more for looking at than handling, and you know that there's a place for that.
Northwest Fancy Fuzzies super chatted us again.
Yay! You guys are the best.
We have messaged you before. Yes, you have. We run a rat rescue / rattery and reptile rescue. We would love to see a video on the importance of frozen thawed versus live feeding, while showing how great pet rats can be too. My rat is watching too.
We haven't done that with pet rats, but we have talked some about the pros and cons of live versus frozen thawed. And I think that'd be great because actually pet rats are amazing. Rats are so cool. It took me a long time before I was okay with feeding rats to things, and I still don't like it at all.
Okay, quick. Jack Clayton asks, what my Cresty won't stop eating his soil even when there's fresh food out. How can I stop this?
Put them on paper towels.
Okay. Ty's Animal World says, will you be making a video on the Cuban false chameleon?
Yes.
Bearded anole anytime in the near future. Daria Tomzak says, what is your experience owning your first reptile compared to your experience now?
Oh, my first reptile was a garter snake. I put it on a jar on my porch, and then I went and ate dinner, and I didn't have a pet reptile anymore. Now I know they need lids.
Would you, let's see, Sean McCausland, would you let a tegu and a dog interact?
It might
Quick.
go okay. There's a situation where it doesn't go horrifically badly. And then there are situations where that goes real bad. And those are the only kinds of situations that can occur when you introduce a dog and a tegu. My tegu and my dog have been somewhat near each other, both on leashes, and not where they could actually access one another because, they both seemed cool with it. But gosh, I mean, it wouldn't take long for that to go downhill in a hurry.
Okay, Lathan Clark did a super chat and asked favorite three breeders on the internet you trust. Quick.
Favorite three? I do like New England reptile distributors. Of course, I like Great Basin Serpentarium. And Clint's Reptiles is pretty good.
Let's see. Can you review? This is Ultra Rain Bro and Racco. Can you review?
Oh, and Bertopia. Get me off the list. Bertopia is awesome.
Can you review giant leaf-tailed geckos?
Maybe. They're real cool. I haven't seen anybody who has like a captive bred baby, and the adults that you see for like $500 at expos, most of them seem to crash. So I'm yet to see one that like I feel really comfortable is doing great in captivity. But once I find one like that, heck yeah, I'm gonna cover them. They're amazing.
Quick. This actually is not a quick question. Jordan Schwartz did a super chat and asked, what is our responsibility to reptiles? Love you.
We should maybe make a whole video about that. That's a huge moral question. My personal opinion on it is that we give them the best life that we can.
Chase Carpenter did a super chat and says, hi, Clinton fam. How is the blood python, and will you be making a video on them?
Heck yeah, we will. I'm just kind of letting him get a little more size. I mean, he's already as big as an adult ball python, but I mean, they get to be just enormous. And I want to give you a feel for what blood pythons are all about. But, expect it in the relatively near future. He's doing great. They poop huge poops. So big.
Just a quick shout out to Sparkly Taser. Hi, Sparkly.
My favorite taser, the Sparkly Taser. So much better than Taser Face.
People are asking how long this is going. Should we probably
We're going to cut it at an hour. We're 58 minutes and 26 seconds. We'll just cut it.
Do you agree? Let's see. Interesting ice wing. Clint, do you agree that frogs are small little boys and need to be protected?
Well, yes. I mean, even the biggest frog is small compared to a boy. And yes, they need to be protected. I mean, there are some major concerns for amphibians right now.
Cat's Beanie asks opinion on heat pads, rocks.
Stay the heck away from heat rocks. Heat pads are pretty good, though. Use a thermostat.
Tate West is asking to see Gus Gus.
There he is. And we just gave you a Gus Gus video last week, but we got more Gus Gus planned. Don't worry, because he's the great.
Le Journal Revisité. I screwed that one up. Have you ever been bitten by a tokay gecko?
No. But you saw I handled one the other day. I have many friends that have been bitten many times. Sounds horrible.
Let's see. Oh, man, they're going so fast.
This is power round. We've only got 20 seconds.
Yeah. Grady Criswell, do you have any advice on how to socialize young crested gecko for handling?
Oh, just make it pleasant. you know, they're pretty easy to handle right out of the egg. So just make sure they're eating consistently. If they're eating well for you and pooping, then they're probably okay to handle in moderation, and just always keep it pleasant. And we are out of time. This was awesome, and you guys are awesome, and you've got lots of great questions, and I think we should do this again. If you agree, let us know down in the comments. As always, like and subscribe, and we hope to see you real soon. Bleep! Oh, bloopers! Blooperty bloops! Oh, that was so crazy. Do you hear that question? That was ridiculous. Are you sure you want to end your stream? Yeah.